campus and online and as well as offline. We have kept a small program at our college when we will be hoisting our national flag, tricolor national flag. At the same time, the Department of History has taken the initiative of conducting a solo lecture session uh, where we'll be hearing from Professor Dr. Priyanka Mullik. I offer my warm welcome to Dr. Mullik to this program, and she will be delivering a lecture on Women and Indian Constitution, the beginning. So the thing is, on this particular day, we celebrate this day in a very special manner. We pay respect to our national tricolor flag. We pay tribute to the national leaders, national great heroes who have sacrificed their life for making this country free from British rule. As Devgani Madam has already mentioned, that in 1950, our Indian Constitution has come into effect, and to mark this day, the whole country organize and conduct different programs like debate competitions, quiz program, and several cultural programs. Because uh, we know that there are difference in culture, language, etc. But somewhere by hoisting our national flag, we particularly want to give the message that we are united here in spite of we have so many difference in their language and cultures. So without wasting further time, I would like to welcome Dr. Molli and also all other participants, our faculty members, students, and all the other staff members who are participating in this program. A very special welcome on my behalf. And I hope that, and also thankful, I'm really thankful that Jani and other members of this organizing committee who have contributed to this program, and hope that all the parties and participants will enjoy this program and definitely will be enlightened of this speech of Dr. Priyanka Molli. Thank you, Dr. Molli, for accepting our invitation and giving your thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam, for your valuable views. Now I would like to invite Professor Dr. Priyanka Mollik to share her views with us on Women and Indian Constitution, the beginning. Over to Dr. Mollik.
First of all, very good morning, and I wish all of you uh, uh, happy Republic Day, and thank you for inviting me. I feel extremely honored and privileged that you have given me this opportunity on this auspicious occasion of 72nd Republic Day of our country to share my thoughts and views with all of you. And a special thanks to Principal Ma'am for giving me this platform to share or express my views. And I thank Debjani also for contacting me for this purpose, for this great purpose. Actually, uh, the theme or the topic, today's topic that titled as Women and the Indian Constitution, the beginning, is very special and very relevant also, because we have to see regularly, on a regular basis in our country, that women are facing various obstacles in every terms, every day in our country. So the question naturally arises regarding the rights that were assured for the women, and the securities they were assured in the Indian Constitution 72 years back. So, uh, uh, actually, Indian Constitution, mm, uh, uh, the longest written of the world, uh, uh, found effect across every corner of the country on 26th January 1950. Among the other features of the constitution, the most significant was the constitutional guarantees of equal rights and various securities for the women in the independent India. Although it is true that, in spite of uh, the long standing and vigorous women movements in our country, the patriarchal aggression or regression, whatever it may be, influences the social and political institutions and determine the opportunities of women and men uh, that were opened or that are open to our country. Uh, but the newly made constitution created a legal and administrative space for the conflict and negotiation between various points and various aspects between men and women in our country. So, today's lecture will explore the processes that the processes of women's emancipation actually through historical events and discourses, and the consequences of that actually resulted uh, uh, into the rights that were gained in the newly made constitution in India. uh, uh, the emergence of gender issues and how actually we can situate the gender issue in the mainstream history of this country, and the construction of identities. We have to remember one thing, that the construction of identities, roles and relation based on gender uh, differences cannot be separated. We cannot see it separately with the other political and social realities of the Indian nation state. So, once a very famous American pioneer in this field of women history or women studies, Gerda Lerner, once said that women are in history, and women have history. Women have their own history, and they are very much in history. And these words became actually a manifesto, and this emerged as a new way of thinking about the gender relationship or the gender issues in our country. And it is true that it's a reality that accepting despite accepting the feminine identity as natural and essential in our society, in our country, this is this always there is a tendency, actually there is a tendency to treat the issue, or to treat it as it is a constructed thing. This hypothesis actually stimulated various questions regarding the women's unequal position, and traced back, and it actually traced back to our colonial history actually. So, uh, in order to actually I have decided, actually, in order to understand the process of emancipation of women, or the various stages of women's movement in our country, and their rights that they were attained in the constitution. Actually, it should be. I will to explain the process. I'll follow chronological as well as a thematic line. Actually, there will be two parts in this lecture. Number one, from the time frame from 1820 to 1920, the first part, that the historical background that consisted between this time frame, through the lens of, it's very important, through the lens of nationalism, and after that, uh, through the lens of modernity, uh, as it was acted as a serious catalyst to it, to the process of women's emancipation. And number two, the time frame I choose, I decide that from 1920 to 1950, the stormy 1940s up to the 1950s. In between this time frame, the constitution and its significance, I'll explain it, and how it protect, or how it uphold or promote women's questions, and their rights, and their participation in the mainstream politics in our country. So, coming in this section, in the later part, in the second part, various important thing we'll have to mind, that the coming up of backward class, not only for the male section, even the female participation from the backward class also uh, uh, made appearance at that point of time. So, um, for the first part, uh, if we uh, take the example of Rash Shundari Devi, a very famous woman born around 1809, and she wrote, actually, um, uh, we actually came to see in her painstaking effort to learn, uh, uh, she wrote in her book, and after that, Kadambini Bosu and Chandramukhi Devi, the first two graduates from Calcutta University, the women, uh, the condition of women were actually progressed very rapidly. Uh, mm, Women were in the, actually always were in the forefront of all the reform movement that took place here in our country in the colonial period of time. The women issue was a actually the women issue was a prerequisite of national regeneration and the nation building process also. It's very important to note that in nation building process that were taking ground at that point of time, the women issue became the maybe the center of the nation building process also. And it was concentrated on legislative remedy, the abolition of shoti, the widow remarriage campaigns actually resulted between the time frame. Just uh, notice the time frame, as I mentioned earlier, from 1820 to 1920. So the Shoti, the abolition of Shoti and widow remarriage campaigns actually happened in the time frame of 1829 to 1856, and various uh, and actually the reinvention of tradition actually with an exposure to modernity that actually justifies to some extent the gender issue actually. And we see that in eastern India there was Brahmo Samaj. In western India there was Prarthana Samaj. In north India there was Arya Samaj, and in south India there was the Theosophical Society. So actually the constitutional safeguard actually the women's history and the actually accompanied the 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 country's journey to self to attain the self determination, to statehood, to nationhood and progress, modernity and development with the constitutional safeguards. So as I mentioned earlier, that the women's question or the gender issue were uh, cannot be discussed uh, separately. These two issues were linked very closely with each other. So uh, uh, in apart from eastern India that I told about Kadambini Devi and Chandramukhi Devi, the first two graduates from Calcutta University. Women from other urban spaces from like Pune, Bombay, Madras, there were Pandita Ramabai, Anandibai Joshi, Tarabai Shinde, Hoimobati Sen also challenged the patriarchal constraints, at least at some point of time, and even some went to participate actively in the politics, in the mainstream politics, and I will came to it later. Even uh, what happened at that time, even a debate arose regarding the women issues or the women education between the modernist and traditionalist also. So actually women's history or women's movement or women liberation or women emancipation or anything around the women question actually has or had a very peculiar relationship with our tradition, with our history, and with our whole perspective also. uh, Dr. Shomita Sen once argues that the colonial discourse has assumed the existence of a domestic domain. Very interesting. She used the term domestic domain in spite of public domain. So domestic domain to demarcate what to understand and master the Indians and what happened. It was a irony, I can say, that the this language nationalism actually uh, inherited or grabbed this language from the colonial ruler actually. So uh, uh, thus, the early nationalist, like early reformer also, redefined the early space for women had become the locus of Indianness, as it earlier I mentioned as the women's issues were uh, gaining ground at the center in the nation building process also. Later modernity appeared as a serious catalyst to it. So it is true, it is true, and we have to accept the a small group of high caste and elite class women were uh, uh, gaining the advantages of women liberation or women education, or uh, that uh, um, that some that small privilege, actually they were exposed. Only a small group actually were exposed to that, and even in the field of education and even employment, where um, uh, employment the issue of employment, they were enjoying that. And the political aspirations also at the same time. But it is also uh, it is also important that although it was limited and restricted to the higher class women or elite class, the other women, the large section of the other women were left out of it. But this process created a space, at least a space, or it actually this resonated the faith that to make the way for women, women's appearances in the public domain, uh, or various other fields also. Historian Lata Muni observed, although historian Lata Muni observed is as this as he she wrote that women were not subject, but women were used as a site for various experiments that were taking place at that point of time by the male elite male class in our country or in our society. But this actually there was a demand for new women at that point time also, and the newly western educated elite male class, they actually wanted uh, a new kind of companionship from their wives, or say they tried to make their daughters as a new women. So this demand also acted as instrumental in this process. So they now the women became more vocal, more active from this point of time. uh, so actually, if we take the cue from the nationalist perspective, from Partho Chatterjee's writing, that uh, uh, that he actually thinks that the historical background that were actually uh, mm, what should I say, the Partho Chatterjee, if we take take Partho Chatterjee's argument, that we can say that nationalist discourse resolved the women's question in the 19th century, and we have to consider the role of nation in understanding gender and vice versa. So uh, the the journey actually begins with the nationalist approach and the uh, regeneration of our nationhood. Uh, from nowadays, the women became more vocal and more active. They say the set of new generation women, actually new women, or new feminist women, through the channels by forming associations and participating in active politics also. Now I came to the second part. From 1920, what happened from 1920 to 1950? Sharola Devi Chaudhurani, the pioneer actually. She was the first woman to realize the need of forming groups that could raise the demands for them. Sharola Devi's efforts actually resulted various Mohila Shamitis or women's association across all over the country. Various Mohila Shamitis set up at that point of time altogether. She actually Sharola Devi was she was a feminist and a nationalist altogether. So women's new role uh, uh, were getting ground from this point of time. These local associations that Mohila Shamitis and we have to remember that these Shamitis were not only initiated by the female activist, but they were initiated by the modern male members uh, also. So these local associations finally laid the ground for national associations for women Indian association uh, that set up in 1917 and followed by the National Council for Indian Women in 1927. All India Women Conference in Pune had established. Uh, uh, All India Women Conference actually acted more successfully in offering national representation for women in alliance with Indian National Congress. It's very important. It was a wise decision for the organization to continue their activities along with the Indian National Congress. Within 10 years, this organization included the various work of the labor class women along with the industry, the opium, the issue of child marriage, along with women education. Now, some of them were taking part in active politics also, as I have said you earlier. Uh, in the partition of 1905 and in Swadeshi movement attracted the educated and even uneducated women also. The consciousness was already ground, uh, and the self-respect of women and confidence about their potential were getting ground from this point of time. uh, Two kinds of political activity were getting ground. Number one, the national and other nationalist movement for Indian independence, and number two, where the uh, leftist other political formation were there, such as the leftist and working class movement also. Women were participating um, um, this out of the mainstream, the then mainstream, the Indian national movement. So they were women's participation actually legitimizes the national movement. Even Mahatma Gandhi also appreciated, and he actually realized the necessity of women's participation in freedom movement and in civil disobedience movement of 1930s. The middle class women um, participated, and it actually worked as a magic. We all know the history of 1930s. So middle class women also gaining was also were also gaining some social benefits, and it strengthened the Indian unity against the foreign rule. So now uh, with the setup of in 1950s, with the setup of Indian constitution, judicial domain with extension of universal franchise, women had secured their rights in the Indian constitution. So um, Indian women are conscious now and fighting for various demands and rights they ever uh, uh, about their rights, actually. And now it's important to notice that now they were away, move away, actually being only the subject. Now legislation um, and now legislation actually uh, uh, they actually gained the legislative benefits. Now they were uh, now they were very actually awakening from inside. Actually, the upheavals of feminist activities and the intervention also shaped the contemporary Indian history. uh, Conscious about their political rights and influenced by the contemporary Western democratic eventualities, these women and actually uh, uh, evolved activity to general political consciousness among women during the early decades of 19th century 20th century. They took up the issue of voting rights, very important, the voting rights within the with the Secretary of State for India, Lord Edwin Montagu, who was in India to discuss the political reforms. The Southborough Franchisee Committee for uh, uh, initially were reluctant to give women the right to vote, but because of the sustained campaign uh, held by various women organizations and the support given by Congress and other political Indian National Congress and other political parties, finally this issue left to the provincial legislative assembly legislator to decide the issue, whereas the women were will be able to vote or not. So the first province that granted women to vote, that were Madras in 1920, and it followed by Bombay in 1921. Uh, in the wake of freedom, the question before in All India Women Organization and Congress was uh, that should it continue the same lines, or should it be reconstituted? The question arose because demands were more or less granted by the constitution at some time or other after India. Sorry. after After that, um, India and after that, although many Indian women were actually held important office in India and abroad also, the status of women were uh, not so secured, and actually their rights and their demands to be um, uh, actually um, realized or raised on organizational basis. So some uh, women were who were held important offices in India and abroad, where we should name their Vijay Lakshmi Pandit, Indian ambassador to Soviet Union, Sarojini Naidu became the governor of Uttar Pradesh. Rajkumari Amrit Kaur was the first health minister of India. Uh, uh, and so many were there. So now how constitution actually secured women's position. Article 14 guarantees equality before law uh, to all citizens, and article 15.1 and article 16.2 actually expand these principles further and prohibited uh, the most important word, discrimination on the basis of religion, caste, and sex. While we remember, Dr. I'd like to mention this point here. As I'm speaking on this topic, women and Indian Constitution, that as we while we remember Dr. B.R. Ambedkar as the father of Constitution and other pioneering male members who helped draft the Indian Constitution, we easily forget the contribution of 15 ladies, 15 women member who helped draft the Constitution. Uh, on this Republic Day, we can give them a tribute to by mentioning their names that we have forgotten already. Um, Ammu, and they were all of them individually uh, had various significances. Ammu Swaminathan, number one, uh, and number two, and very important, um, Dakshiani Velayuddan, the first depressed class female or first depressed class women who were attached with the drafting of the Indian Constitution. So um it was a very remarkable incident at that point of time, actually, when our country was actually uh, uh, actually uh, caste system in our country at that point of time were very cruel at that point of time. So under this scenario, uh, uh, women from depressed class, um, helping the constitution to be draft is actually indeed a very important event. Then Begum Arias Russell, the only Muslim member, Rani Durgabati Deshmukh, Hamza Jibraj Mehta, uh, she actually proposed a different charter for the women. Then Kamala Chaudhuri, Leela Rai, Malati Chaudhuri, Purnima Banerjee, Rajkumari Amrit Kaur. She was the first Indian health minister and the founder of AIMS also. Then Renuka Rai, Sarojini Naidu, Sucheta Kripalini, Vijayalakshmi Pandit, and Annie Maskarni. All of them later held various important offices in India and abroad also. So uh, it was a fair participation of various religion, caste, and various sections of our society. From now, the debates over personal laws and reservation of seats for women actually started. The participation in nation building process, uh, 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 participation in struggle for freedom movement, um, and security in the Indian Constitution actually does not um, um, mean that women had attained equality as once Nehru warned women that the uh, right rights are rarely given away. They must be owned. So it's very important and significant for the women's of India actually. Uh, so um, it actually, the question of discrimination between women and men actually remain as a social reality in our country. Although Indian women are conscious now and fighting for various reasons, various demands, the question of equality and the discrimination actually remains. What I want to mean that it remains in our society. So, mm, um, mm, in conclusion, I can say that it was indeed, considering all the facts, it was indeed an achievement in the country where hardly 2% of women were literate, and the credit actually lies to some extent to the constitution, um, actually to the Indian constitution. And women were fighting nowadays, and women were are fighting for various demands, for various reasons, and uh, they are now they are going beyond the mere constitutional guarantees and so on. They actually um fighting, or they are going for further independence, further consciousness, further uh, further achievement and regeneration, and of the women, of the identity of women as a self. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, madam, for enhancing our knowledge with your informative lecture. I'm sure it will help the students in appreciating history in a better way. Now I would like to request Professor Deepayan Datto of Department of English. Please commence the video.
Good morning. Am I audible to everyone?
Yes.
Thank you. We are here to celebrate India's 72nd Republic Day. And before ma'am's lecture, there was a video documentary which couldn't be played due to some technical issue, for which I really apologize. And because this is a very good documentary that I found online, I really wanted to show it to all of you. And I'm trying to voice over the some of the important parts over this video due to this technical issue. So let's start. India, as we know, is a home to one of the oldest civilizations of the world. It dates back to several thousands of years. Today, India is blessed with a very rich and diverse culture, natural resources, and today, India is a home to over a billion people. India achieved independence on August 15th, 1947, after decades of struggle by our freedom fighters that ultimately led India to its independence. But even after independence, India was a constitutional monarchy under Lord Mountbatten, who was the first governor of India. India was technically, because of this, an independent dominion of the British Commonwealth. To drive to full governance and sovereignty, a constitution drafting committee led by B.R. Ambedkar and other members were formed. The final commission was signed by 284 members of the assembly who met for 3 years to draft the constitution. The constitution became effective on January 26, 1950, which we celebrate as Republic Day. This is to honor the constitution of the country. This day marks the beginning of a new era of Indian governance and legal system. India was declared a sovereign, democratic, socialist, and secular republic. This assured the citizens justice, liberty, equality, and fraternity, which marks the day so important for all of Indians, all of us, all Indians. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Dipayan Datto. Now, I would like to give a special vote of thanks to our Principal Madam, Dr. Moushumi Singh Gupta, for arranging such an informative lecture session. And I would also like to acknowledge the contribution of our technical team members, Professor Pooja Pal of Department of Computer Science and Professor Dipayan Datta of Department of English. Without their support, it would not have been possible to conduct this session. Thank you all for attending the event. Have a good day.
So I declare the closing of the session. Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you for your participation.
Thank you,
Thank
madam.
you, madam.
Thank you, madam.
Thank you, madam. Debjani?
হ্যাঁ হ্যাঁ ম্যাডাম
Debjani?
হ্যাঁ ম্যাডাম আছি
All the participants are here now. Though remaining the teachers are also here. So I think so if it's possible, I don't know how many of here can sing national anthem. Just now we have hoisted our national flag in our college premises. But I think if you or some teachers are there, so we can play, I mean, the at least sing the national anthem, because by that
হ্যাঁ
we can pay our respect to this the flag and our nation. That's right. Okay.
ওকে
Just uh, teachers, do you agree?
Yes,
ইয়েস
ma'am.
ম্যাডাম
Yes,
Okay.
madam.
Yes,
Ma'am.
definitely splendid the national anthem. Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
I am ready. So let's start.
नायक जय हे भारत भाग्य विधाता
पंजाब सिंधु हिमाचल उच्छल जल तरंग तब शुभ नामे तब शुभ
नाहि
गाहे तब जय गाथा जन गण मन
जय हे
भारत
भारत
भाग्य विधाता जय
जय
हे जय हे जय
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 जय जय जय
हे
वंदे
जय
मातरम
Vande
वंदे
Mataram.
मातरम।
वंदे
जय हिंद।
मातरम जय हिंद
वंदे
जय
Jai
हिंद
Hind.
जय हिंद।
थैंक यू ऑल
Thank you,
Thank you,
madam.
ma'am.
Thank
madam।
you, madam.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.